Hi, I'm Doug Tolman. I'm here with Darren Popkin, currently the sheriff of Montgomery County, and who won his primary last night because you ran unopposed.
Yeah, Doug, I was unopposed for the primary. I have really, I want to thank the voters for their tremendous support for me. You know, they've been tremendously supportive of me over the last 2 terms, and as I head into this 3rd term, again, yesterday, I was just very honored to have support and from the community on the great work that the Sheriff's Office does.
Okay, and you will have an election in November. You do have a challenger in November.
Yes, I do have a Republican challenger in November. As you know, with the primary yesterday, I'm the only Democratic candidate, but I will have a Republican candidate against me in the general election.
So let's start off. What role does the sheriff play in law enforcement in Montgomery County?
Yeah, so the sheriff is the enforcement arm of the courts. Any sort of process that is issued out of the courts is the sheriff's responsibility. So from arrest warrants to child support matters to domestic violence protective orders, anything that the courts, and it's thousands and thousands of documents a year that the court would put out. The police in Montgomery County typically are the 911 responders and will do the initial investigation. Once any sort of criminal matter or civil matter gets into the court system, though, then the sheriff is responsible. The sheriff is actually the enforcement arm of the courts.
How many sworn officers do you oversee?
I have 200 total staff. I have about 155 sworn deputy sheriffs and around 45 civilian staff. So around 200 staff with a $23 million budget on top of it.
Okay. So what's the big issues for your office for the next 4 years, do you think?
Yeah, so the Sheriff's Office runs the Domestic Violence Center, Montgomery County's Family Justice Center, and I've been intimately involved in the establishment and still on the daily operations of that center because we receive an incredible number of domestic violence protective orders a year. In any given year, there's more than 5,000 911 calls related to domestic violence, and out of those, about 3,000 protective orders. So we are really doing a great job at the Family Justice Center in saving lives on a daily basis. And as part of that, it requires often the seizure of firearms. And I chair the legislative committee for the chiefs and sheriffs statewide and spend quite a bit of time in Annapolis working on really sensible laws that would apply to public safety statewide, but especially this term with some domestic violence bills that remove some firearms out of the hands of domestic violence offenders. And so we're really moving forward on that. We have a lot of work to do with the courts to set up processes to make this safer, but we always know that if you remove the firearm out of a domestic violence incident and the equation is less a firearm, it makes everybody safer.
So there was a lot of talk in the last legislative session about, and I think in many legislative sessions, about removing firearms from volatile situations. What new tools would you need, do you think, to improve the situation?
Well, the legislative body in Annapolis this year passed 3 very good bills. One of them is Maryland's version of the red flag bill, which if somebody's having a mental health crisis of some sort, it gives the sheriff now statutory authority to actually go in and seize firearms. So for example, in the tragic shooting down in Florida, there were a lot of red flags for the young man who went in and did that shooting down in Florida. Maryland didn't have any statutory authority. It didn't give the sheriff the opportunity to actually go into a home if there was some sort of mental health or stressful situation, a crisis that we know firearms are involved in. There's been some threats made. This new bill gives us statutory authority now to go in and seize firearms, but there's a lot of due process with it. So once the sheriff takes these firearms, the people who own these firearms will be allowed to go back into court and argued some due process of whether or not they can get the guns back or not. So prior to this legislative session, This law goes into effect October 1st of this year, and I believe that it's going to save lives.
Okay.
There were two other bills that also, one was specifically once somebody's convicted of a domestic violence crime, that it is mandatory that they surrender those firearms within 48 hours. Prior to that being in place, there was no process in place. It is a violation of federal and state law for someone who's convicted of a domestic violence assault, domestic related crime, to be in possession of a firearm. So now we'll have processes in place. And the last bill another great bill that was passed this year that also goes into effect October 1st, if somebody is released from detention prior to their case coming in and violates the conditions of those release and domestic related crimes, again, I'll have statutory authority to make an arrest if that occurs. So with the combination of really the efforts in Annapolis this year, with some really great advocacy groups, Moms Demand Action, and the legislators who supported this, we really passed some great bills that are going to make, I truly believe, make people safer in this county and hopefully save lives.
Okay. The red flag bill, I understand, has some controversy around it. People are concerned about the due process that's associated with it.
Yes, during the legislative session, I did have an opportunity. I was down there for every session in front of the legislators that took place. There was some controversy involved because it involves the seizure of firearms. And in those sort of cases, it does. It is, a lightning rod in a lot of discussions. However, it is for a limited period of time. Someone will be able to go back into court and have a hearing in front of a judge to determine whether or not their crisis that they may be going through is so extreme that the sheriff needs to hold on to those guns for a little while longer, or the courts could rule that the sheriff will be returning the guns shortly. So although there is a brief period of time that someone may be without their firearms, if you, as a reasonable safety measure, especially in the school situations, because in across the country, of all school shootings that have been tracked since Columbine, 70% of those shootings, the guns came from the home. So if you consider where the guns are coming from and the short period of time that the guns would maybe be out of the house, and the possibility of saving lives, and the due process that the state legislators built into this bill, I believe it is an effective law and could maybe make the difference of somebody getting hurt.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit more about your work on domestic violence. What exactly, you mentioned the Family Justice Center. Describe their mission and how they help people.
So the Family Justice Center was created back in 2009 with myself, the state's attorney, John McCarthy at the time, and Mr. Leggett, the county executive, and from support from the county council. We established a model wraparound service location in Rockville that anybody who has been a victim of domestic violence can come forward free of charge, with no questions asked as far as any sort of status. And we provide really wraparound services from governmental agencies and community partners to try to break the cycle of domestic violence, to make sure that when someone can go home, they are going home safe. They often will have a protective order in place afterwards. The Montgomery County Police Department, Detectives, Family Crimes Division is right there. And so anybody who comes in and that has been criminally assaulted, the detectives are there to provide any sort of interview. The state's attorney is there also on site. I have more than 35 staff on site from the sheriff's office, to include victim assistants that work directly with the clients, deputies who enforce the protective orders. And so the wraparound services that are provided there really help anyone who has tried to navigate a system that is in place when you're going through crisis. Because right now you go to one location to receive services versus having to go to multiple locations throughout the county. It is a model for the country and a model for the state of Maryland, as Montgomery County was the first in Maryland to have a family justice center. Prince George's County just opened one last year. So it is a model, and it is saving lives, and the staff over there from all the governmental agencies and private partners are just phenomenal.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sheriff. I appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.